So how is this for a mind-blowing statistic? Apparently 62% of the inmates in county jails are not yet convicted. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and this is Barney the Vlog Dog, who is having yet another bad behavior day. A lot of subscribers have been asking me to do a vlog on the bail reform laws or the new bail laws that just took effect in New York in January 2020. It's obviously not something that's big news in Canada, but I started looking into it and it's actually quite fascinating. It's fascinating from both the legal and historical perspective, and it's also amazing because I never fully appreciated certain statistics involved in all of this. Apparently, according to the last survey, over 60% of inmates in county jails had not yet been convicted. And at first, the statistic didn't make any sense to me because I didn't understand how that could be the case, but then it all came together when I started looking into the bail reform laws in New York. And in order to understand the issue, we need to go back in time, and I mean back in time. Bail as a concept was developed in the Anglo-Saxon period in England over 1500 years ago. And the idea at the time is that the accused would have to find a surety, not necessarily someone to put up money on the spot, but someone to guarantee that if the accused fled, the surety would pay the amount to the victim that would otherwise be owed. The accused didn't have to put the money up front, they just had to show that they had someone who would warrant that they were good for it in the event that the accused absconded and never paid what was owed to the victim. And so for a long period of time, like hundreds of years, you would have the surety who would warrant that they would be good to pay the victim in case the accused fled. And then with the Industrial Revolution, travel became much more easy. So on the one hand, it became a little more difficult to find friends or relatives to act as surety, and on the other hand, it became much more easy to flee. And so over time, the concept of bail evolved into actually depositing a sum of money to ensure that the accused would show up to trial, failing which they would actually lose their deposit, their bail. But this definitely caused something of an injustice because obviously the rich would be more able to put up bail while the poor would not be able to put up bail. And so in the late 1800s, England passed what is called the Bail Act, which was basically a method of finding other non-monetary means to ensure that the accused would show up to their trial and not flee town. Wanna go down? Okay, go down. Ugh! And so while England, through the Bail Act, sought alternatives to ensure that someone showed up for their court date, the US went in the direction of monetary bail. And so it went like this. When someone was accused of a crime, they would have to post a certain amount of money, bail, with the court to ensure that they would show up for their court appearance. And for people with money, this posed absolutely no problem. But what for people without money? What ended up happening in the US? Well, where there is a demand, there will become a market. And the US saw the rise of commercial bondsmen. What are commercial bondsmen? Well, they're basically like banks. They will lend money to the accused to post as bail, but that money has to be repaid to the commercial bondsman. And as with any loan from a bank, there was interest or fees to be paid on any amount that was borrowed from a bondsman in order to pay bail. Over the course of time, the courts increasingly used cash bail as a method of ensuring the accused would show up to their trial, and the commercial bondsman market flourished. That said, despite the existence of the commercial bondsman market, there was a massive discrepancy, a mass inequality among who could post bail and who couldn't. What happens if the court orders you to post bail as a condition to your release, but you don't have the money to post bail and you can't get one from a commercial bondsman? Well, you just sit in jail until it's your trial date. What would happen over time is the wealthy or those who could afford to post bond would post bond and be released, and those who couldn't would stay in jail, which invariably meant the poor ended up staying in jail at disproportionate levels. The poor were stuck in jail despite not being convicted until they could have their trial to determine their guilt or innocence. And that is how you get to the statistic of 62% of inmates in county jails not yet being convicted of any crime, but being in jail nonetheless. And you have to appreciate what that actually means. It means that 2/3 of county jails are filled with inmates who have not yet been convicted. It sheds some light onto the Swedish criminal justice system, but bear in mind, A$AP Rocky was in jail for 2 or 3 months before he stood trial. But in Sweden, compared to the US, only 25% of the prison population are in pretrial detention. Not only that, but as we saw in the A$AP Rocky case, the delays to get to a criminal trial in Sweden are amazingly fast compared to the United States. In the United States, given the delays to get to a criminal trial, there have been people who have been in pretrial detention for longer than their sentence would have been for the crime for which they were in pretrial detention. And in the context of researching for the purposes of this vlog, I saw something online that I found rather shocking. Apparently an American politician named Gavin Newsom said something to the effect that the only countries in the world that have cash bail are Duterte's Philippines and Trump's America. Coming from Canada, where I know as a matter of fact that we have cash bail, I thought that this statement reeked of an apparent inaccuracy. And then I saw that PolitiFact did a fact check on it, and I went to read PolitiFact's fact check, and it just blew my mind. Parentheses, PolitiFact, as far as I'm concerned, has just discredited themselves as a fact-checking fact checker. I'm not kidding when I say this. They rated this statement as mostly true, with the caveat that it would have been more accurate to specify that he was referring to the commercial bondsman market as opposed to cash bail in and of itself. Translation, the statement was false, and this is what statement would have been true. The fact is that a great many countries above and beyond the Philippines and the United States of America have cash bail systems. Canada has it, Australia has it, New Zealand has it, and I can go on. But it is true that these countries don't have a commercial bondsman market. That seems to be limited to the Philippines and the United States of America. But it is not mostly true to say that the only countries that have cash bail are the Philippines and the United States. It is patently false. Parentheses closed, moving on. So that is the context of the cash bail system. It is necessarily a system that lends itself to inequalities based on one's financial means. Nobody can deny that. And that is why people want to reform the cash bail system, because what it means is if two people are charged for the very same crime and one person has the money to post bail and the other one doesn't, one sits in jail until the trial while the other one pays their way out, and that is just not fair. And as of very recently, New York has implemented some of this bail reform where they are no longer going to ask for cash bail for certain types of crimes. When it comes to misdemeanors and non-violent crimes, judges are no longer going to require cash bail so that these people are going to be let out on their own recognizance and expected to come back for their trial. Now, the law itself is just so complicated it's virtually incomprehensible, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. But that is the essence of the reform. Judges are no longer going to insist on cash bail when it comes to certain crimes, and the accused are going to be let out pending their trial. People's obvious concern is that we are letting out criminals onto the streets, crime is going to skyrocket, etc., etc. But one has to bear in mind that these are not yet criminals. They have not yet been convicted. Now, for whatever the reason, in New York since the 1970s, judges have not been allowed to consider the potential dangerousness of a criminal in deciding what the bail should be. They have only been allowed to consider the likelihood of the accused coming to trial when setting bail. There are a number of other factors that a judge can consider, such as the flight risk or the likelihood of the accused intimidating witnesses or interfering with the investigation if they are let out of jail. But the main argument in support of bail reform is that too many people are being held in jail on minor charges, and the only reason they are held in jail is because they can't post bail. And you are keeping a legally innocent person in jail, sometimes for extended periods of time, and the consequences on their life can be disastrous. Sometimes what ends up happening is that the accused pleads guilty just to get out of jail. And so you end up with false convictions because it's actually easier for the accused to just plead guilty and get out of jail as opposed to sitting there until they can sit trial. Now, there have been reports of spikes in crime that seem to coincide perfectly with the implementation of this new bail reform. And the counterpoint to this counterpoint is, notwithstanding the fact that 90% of all arrests now are subject to release without bail, judges are still free to implement the cash bail system as we know it for violent felonies, sex-related charges, domestic violence, and other types of crimes of that nature. We will see how this progresses and whether or not the doom and gloom predictions of those who oppose the bail reform come to fruition. Notwithstanding those fears, which are entirely understandable, the bottom line remains that pretrial detention is of an innocent person. Given the delays in the criminal justice system, it can sometimes be for extended periods of time that will destroy any person's life. So there is good reason to support this type of criminal justice reform. We're just going to have to see if it's implemented properly and if the feared negative results ever come to fruition to one degree or another. Alright, I hope I have shed some light on the subject for you. It's been somewhat eye-opening for myself as well. If you like my videos and you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below. If you want to support the channel, the merch links, you can get some good merch, are in the pinned comment with a PayPal option for anybody who feels more comfortable with that. If you want to watch another one of my great vlogs, I'm going to post a random one right here. And now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah.